Ontario has lost something north of 300,000 manufacturing jobs in the past decade and a half. And as terrifying as that number sounds, some economists now predict that the fundamentals which drove that change are headed for just about every other sector, too. Spoiler alert, the robots are coming. To explain what they see ahead for the future of work, we welcome Armin Yalnizyan, formerly with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, now an independent economist, and Sunil Johal, Policy Director at the Mowat Centre and co-author of Working Without a Net, Rethinking Canada's Social Policy in the New Age of Work. And it's good to see you two back here in our studio. I want to just set up our discussion by pointing out that we were in London the last couple of nights doing two programs on essentially what's happened to the City of London and southwestern Ontario, given the, I won't say disappearance, but given the hard hit that the manufacturing sector has taken over the last decade and a half. So we want to sort of follow up on the momentum of those two programs and focus on the following. You first, Sunil. How much have the job losses in Canada that we have experienced over the last decade and a half been as a result of manufacturing moving to lower wage jurisdictions as opposed to from automation, in your view?
It's a really interesting question. When we look at the data that we've got, it's hard to pinpoint exactly the causes behind this, but if you take the example of auto manufacturing, for example, so output in the auto sector in Ontario is exactly the same in 2015 as it was in 2000, but there are 30% less people working in the sector.
So they make as many cars
with 30% fewer people. 30% less people. And
fewer people.
Fewer people, exactly. Car companies were making billions of dollars of investments in machinery and equipment in the early to mid 2000s. So, I mean, it's fairly clear that there's something going on there. And studies in the United States, in the context of Trump saying that I'm going to reshore all these jobs that we've lost to free trade deals, have actually found that about 85% of U.S. manufacturing job losses are a result of technology and automation rather than free trade deals, which are a much smaller proportion of those job losses. So if we apply the same logic to Ontario, it might not be quite 85% due to technology, but I would say it's definitely 50, 60, 70% at least.
Armin, would you share that view, that it's more automation than simply business looking for low wage?
Undoubtedly, I'm not going to dispute this, but I would just come back with three different very quick factoids. Number one, technology also creates jobs. It doesn't just destroy jobs. Number two, bring the technology on. 100 years ago, we had 40% of our workforce in agriculture. We now have less than 2%. And it's not because we're eating less. We're producing more food with fewer people. This is good news. Number three, the phenomenon we're talking about means that income inequality is of more importance for us to address than ever before, because the fruits of growth are going to a smaller and smaller group of people that own the capital that are producing the work. So the owners of the robots are going to need to lean against the wheel with us a little bit more.
So that is more a political discussion as opposed to an economic
rather
discussion.
than a technophobic discussion, which I don't think is helpful.
Understood. Let's put the first of, I think, a few graphics we're going to bring up during the course of our discussion, because there have been some studies done into the risk of job loss as a result of automation over the next decade or two. And boy, oh boy, do they say vastly different things. Sheldon, let's bring this up. Here we go. This is the Brookfield Institute study, which suggests that over the next decade or two, there are as many as 42% of all of our jobs in Canada at risk. That would be 7.5 million jobs as a result of automation. That is a frightening-looking future. On the other hand, there is another study out of the OECD which suggests the number could be only 9% and only 1.6 million jobs at stake. So, Sunil, this is either a huge, cataclysmic future we are looking at or not. And we need to know which it is right now.
And nobody has a crystal ball, obviously. But I mean, even when we're looking at those two studies and the differences between them, one of them, the larger number of 7.5 million jobs, was using an occupation-based methodology. So what occupations are at high risk of automation, and those that are at high risk were counted as jobs that might well be lost in the next 2 decades. Whereas the OECD study was looking at tasks, kind of recognizing that all jobs, including mine, yours, Armin's, are bundles of tasks, essentially. So some of the things I do could be automated in the future, but that doesn't mean my job will be necessarily lost. And the important thing to keep in mind here is even if 7.5 million jobs are lost over the next 10 to 20 years, as Armin mentioned, many other jobs are going to come into existence and as a complement to technology or maintenance jobs.
Well, let me follow up with
jobs.
Armin on that. The reality is there will be jobs building the robots, servicing the robots, maintaining the robots, cleaning the robots, taking the robots out for lunch, whatever happens with robots. But we do wonder whether or not the jobs that will be lost through automation will be, in fact, replaced by whatever servicing of those new jobs is required. Do you have a sense of that?
I think we're not thinking about technology appropriately in this conversation, that if all we're talking about is automating tasks, then who knows what the future is. But technology includes artificial intelligence. It involves platform economies which connect people and things in brand new ways and combine resource allocation in brand new ways that unlock value chains. It also includes artificial intelligence, which is permitting us to do things we could not have dreamed possible previously. So we're looking at all sorts of new jobs that I cannot now presage, but right now there are things that are jobs for AI trainers. There are extraordinary jobs in science and technology and engineering and medicine that were not possible to do before. We have huge possibilities on how to improve our lives. Where we have to pay attention to this is that public policy actually makes sure that the fruits of these benefits are better distributed than what we've seen in the last wave of economic growth that didn't involve automation, and that we actually make sure that public policy doesn't make things worse. For example, flooding what is now becoming an increasingly global market with temporary foreign workers.
I agree with some of what Armin said, but I think the challenge is technology is likely to accelerate existing trends like income inequality and precarious work, because what we're seeing is these technology companies and these platforms, they're highly mobile in today's world. So it's really hard for a jurisdiction like Ontario to regulate a company like Uber and say, we're going to mandate that you pay your drivers a minimum wage. Because if Uber doesn't like that decision, they don't have to close up many factories or bring back all the cars that they purchased because they didn't buy any cars. Essentially, all they have to do is flip a switch in Silicon Valley, say Ontario's off the list of jurisdictions where Uber operates, and there, we're done.
But again, it does get back to what Armin said about political leadership. If every jurisdiction, let's say in North America, decides that Uber has to play by rules that it has heretofore not wanted to play by,
exactly, but that's a challenge of coordinated government action, which if you look at the climate change file, governments are horrible at coordinated action. So if we look at something like regulation across the board for technology platforms, maybe that might work. The other challenge is, for example, corporate tax coordination. If large companies like Google and Apple can shift their profits to wherever they want and offshore them in Ireland, then nobody in Canada is seeing any of the benefits of Google making billions of dollars in profits. But the challenge for that is it only takes one or two countries to say, we're not going to play ball with everybody else. We're going to keep our tax rates incredibly low. And that propagates the situation we're in currently.
Armin?
We are in an era where it is becoming more difficult to imagine governments acting in concert as everybody goes, America first, Britain first, Canada first, and all that sort of stuff. But we know what the answer is. I was just at an OECD conference in Paris, taking a look at how countries are working in concert with one another within the OECD bloc to do exactly what you are talking about, to start with rules. You talk about Uber being able to flick a switch because they don't own fleets. You know that their long-term game plan is to own fleets that haul
driverless cars.
Right? So we are dealing with the technology itself changing and the business plans changing, and if we don't work in concert, we will be screwed. But let me just say, this will not be easy and it will not be cheap. The way we dealt with the labor force going from 40% involved in agriculture to 2% involved in agriculture over a series of decades.
While still outputting the same thing.
While still
or
outputting or actually improving output. And seeing a flood of uneducated, brawn but not brains moving into cities trying to get jobs that they were not prepared for. The response to that was public, free high school. Right? Like, this was not a cheap thing. We are going to have to look at people on the job and off the job being able to move in and out of their ability to retrain, but it means investing as much in these leading edge companies that jurisdictions want to invest in to make sure that they're at the front edge of the economy, investing as much in their people as in these companies. And we've got Industry 4.0 all over the map in policy and Workers 4.0 nowhere on the map. We've got to change the way we think about this.
I'm trying to keep up with 2.0 here. You're at 4.0 already. Let's do should we show this here? Boston Dynamics releasing a new video of its latest robot, Handle. Just happened this week. Let's take a look at this, shall we? Let's roll this. Now, I mean, that looks cool, obviously, but that thing can also pick up 100 pounds of boxes and schlep stuff all over the place. Do you want to predict what kinds of jobs we humans will no longer be doing in 10 or 20 years because that thing is going to be doing them all?
I mean, in the case of a robot like that, I mean, if you think about warehouse jobs or kind of any manual labor job, that robot could do it as effectively or better, never get tired, never get sick. And once you make the investment in the robot, you never have to retrain it. You can actually reprogram the robot to do different things. And we're seeing that across the board. I mean, spot welding robots in the United States average out at a cost of $8 an hour. A human doing the same job is $25 an hour. So, I mean, faced with that choice, what company is going to say, let me pay 3 times more for a human to do this type of job?
Doesn't need a pension, doesn't need a sick day, doesn't need maternity leave, doesn't need parental sick leave, I mean, the list goes on, right? Is this an irresistible, inevitable trend?
Yeah, maybe. Who cares? We've been talking about lights out factories since I entered the profession in the mid 80s as a labor economist. This has been on the menu for decades. And frankly, it does improve efficiency. It does increase productivity. It makes life cheaper and faster and better. That's what you want technology to do. The question is, how do you share the fruits of those gains? Mm-hmm. And the second question is, how do we regulate all the other jobs that aren't like that? Like we're just kind of, we're falling like a moth to the flame. We're thinking, oh, we're screwed because of this particular type of image.
Not necessarily screwed, but we are going to have to adjust, right?
Sure, we're going to have to adjust. We always have had to adjust. People talk about disruption as if they would like to just stay asleep. Life is always about being disrupted and things changing. So the question is, how are you making sure all of the jobs, irrespective of what platform they're on, have got the same protections, that any worker actually is being treated like a human with basic human rights, and that we get a share of the benefits that all of our wisdom and smarts are creating.
Sunil.
Armin mentioned the word smarts, and I think that's very relevant because that robot can outwork us, and none of us can jump as high as that robot or carry as much as that robot. But the game changer right now is that artificial intelligence can actually outthink us, and that's something I think we really need to cope with. Agricultural workers are one thing, but they could move from working on a farm to going and getting a job in an office over the course of 50 or 80 years. I mean, that's what those types of people are doing differently. But now we're seeing Goldman Sachs investment bankers and currency traders and equity traders losing their jobs. These are people making $1 million a year. So I can sympathize with what Armin is saying, but I think this time might truly actually be different. If computers can outthink us, what do we have left? If we can't outwork something and we can't outthink it, unfortunately, I don't get paid to sit on the couch and watch TV.
We're going to get to that part of the conversation in a second. I do first want to bring up this graph here. We're actually going to bring up a series of graphs. So hang in there with us, folks. Here's the overarching picture here. This is the United States of America, job growth, and we compare routine versus non-routine jobs. We've got all 4 lines on at once. We're going to sort of pick this apart a little bit and show just the non-routine jobs off the top and see what has happened to them over the course of the last 30 years. So you want to do that, Sheldon? Good. Okay. Sunil, take us through this graph here and suggest to us the importance of the trajectory of these 2 lines.
Sure. So what we see here in the United States over the last 30 years are that non-routine jobs. So a non-routine cognitive job is somebody like an architect or a software engineer. They're using their mind, and what they're doing is changing on an hourly basis, probably. Those jobs are increasing steadily over time. And we're also seeing non-routine manual jobs increase over time. So that would be a job where somebody is in the service sector, or there may be a home care worker or something like that. So I mean, you're using your hands, using your body, but what you're doing is changing on a day-to-day basis.
But
so those jobs are steadily increasing over time.
Right. If you're a university or community college student right now and you look at this chart, you're going to want to probably look at a non-routine cognitive job where you've got to think and adapt. And
absolutely. You want to get into a sector where things change on a day-to-day or hour-to-hour basis, and it's a dynamic
Okay, now let's bring up the second of the two sets of lines, and they look pretty flat to me.
Absolutely. So this is when we're looking at routine jobs, both cognitive routine jobs. So if somebody's, for example, an office assistant, they're answering the phone, kind of typing similar short memos to somebody every day, and also routine manual jobs. So somebody working in a warehouse or in an auto assembly plant where you're kind of welding car parts together. Those jobs have stagnated and are actually on the decline. And the trend actually holds true in Ontario. The Ontario Ministry of Finance just did a very similar analysis in the past month that shows the exact same trend line in Ontario. So if you're doing something routine, whether it's manual or using your mind, you're at risk from automation. If you're doing something that's non-routine and changing, you're probably a little bit safer.
You're not playing Chicken Little here today. We understand that. So you look at those four lines, and what do you see?
I see two things. First of all, maybe we will get rid of more routine jobs as automation takes place. Maybe we will even lose some capacity to do non-routine cognitive and manual jobs because of the rise of artificial intelligence and a combination of robotics with artificial intelligence. In fact, however, a lot of the artificial intelligence babies are on our smartphones. We can do stuff we never were able to do before. Because I have said now repeatedly, what this wave of technology does is lower costs and make things more efficient, allocate resources better. We could have better, cheaper healthcare. We have more people less sick, but because they get better treatment with a hybrid combination of machines and humans doing more procedures, more diagnostics and more surgical procedures, even more therapy more quickly, and getting access to care faster. We know we're looking at a whole wave of jobs that are going to disappear, but we're also getting waves of jobs emerging, which ironically, Uber, TaskRabbit, Airbnb, ways of making money that we could not have done even 5 years ago en masse. And the issues here is not just new opportunities and old opportunities, but how much the new opportunities look like jobs of 100 years ago, where you have no control over your working hours or over your pay. You have no coverage for sick days or vacation days or health, and no coverage for health and safety concerns. We have got a real urgent task to keep our eye on the work that we do have and make sure that people can continue to organize to improve their lives, which these platforms permit you to do. I mean, they are quintessentially about people communicating with people combining in new ways and using those platforms to actually improve our lives because we're connecting with one another.
And I think in an ideal world that would happen, but I think realistically these platforms we're operating necessarily in the workers' interest.
They're starting to be exactly that in Europe. I was just really blown away. We're just learning how to use these technologies for us.
The question is, what we're seeing is 50 years ago, people had what we call the standard employment relationship. I had a full-time job with benefits. It was well-paying. One person could support an entire household. We've seen over the past 40 to 50 years, that has steadily declined to the point where two people generally need to work to make the same amount as that person 40 or 50 years ago did. They may not have benefits, they may not have a pension. And I think what we're seeing with technologies, it's accelerating this trend towards the unbundling of work from full-time jobs to less secure, more precarious types of work. So I wish and I hope that Armin is right, that this will make things easier for us, more efficient. It'll be a wonderful future. But my fear is, and I think reality up until right now bears out the fact that this is leading to a more precarious workforce. It's leading to lower wages for people, unless you happen to be in the kind of select few who are software engineers, you're in management.
Or unless you bring the political leadership to bear that Armin would like to see. And I wonder, I mean, you've done that whole study, which I read, and it's fascinating, but Where do you see, where are the solutions?
Political leadership is great, but the question becomes, if we have fewer and fewer people holding vast amounts of wealth, we're going to have to tax those people very heavily to provide universal pharmacare, more robust pensions, potentially things like a guaranteed annual income. And that's what we recommend in our report. Let's invest in those types of social infrastructure and supports that people need. The question, though, becomes in not the next 10 to 20 years, but maybe 30 to 40 years out, where's the money going to come from? If there are only 500 or 1,000 people who we're taxing to get this wealth, why are they going to stay in Canada and pay those high taxes when they can just shift operations and move to a different jurisdiction?
What's the answer to that?
Well, it seems to me twofold. First of all, Bill Gates, not me, is saying tax the robots as one way of finding the money. And you could actually extend that to a bit tax, where every transaction of information gets a micro tax attached to it. So the robo traders are getting taxed more heavily, and people that use data more heavily, for example, automated and AI-based production functions get taxed more heavily. To be able to recycle that right back into make the labor force you do have playing its A game and using those resources to support the social welfare, not just the income, but actually the social welfare. I want to go back to this idea that we are a global labor force now. Everything about these technologies is integrating us into global supply chains, and that the problems still remain very local about, do I have a decent roof over my head? Do my kids get the childcare they need since I have to work? Do I get access to the healthcare services that I have? Technology is our friend. Technology can help us get all of these things more rapidly, cheaper, more targeted to our needs, but we are not because we are so afraid of it, we are not imagining how to use this technology to actually improve social well-being. All we are seeing is the disaster that is looming, and we don't actually have answers.
No, I don't want to call it a disaster, but we do have to wrap our heads around the notion that whereas today we may have 2/3 of the labor force participating in work, we may see a future in 20 years where 30% of the people are going to be participating in work, in which case, what do the rest of the 70% of us do?
Can I just say that David Otter has got a really good TED Talk from the early part of February. If your audience has got an opportunity to view it, I highly recommend it. We could live a 1915 style of life with 17% of the work of then. We don't do that because we aspire to the new things that are happening. There are new technologies available. We need to be working with one another to actually share the benefits of this wave of technology in a way that doesn't freak people out, that technology is taking our jobs. Yes, it's taking some of our jobs. That's not a bad thing. On the one hand, we say we want more productivity. On the other hand, we say don't change anything. Which is it?
Well, do you see in the political leadership of this province, this country, this world, an appetite to get into some of the realities and the new decisions that are going to have to be made?
I think the challenge here is we've got a massive cross-cutting issue, which touches on economic issues, social issues, regulatory issues, tax issues. Nobody knows what's going to happen exactly. Armin or myself, we're all kind of making informed guesses or hypotheses, essentially. And this is also a long-term issue. So, governments historically, or as I said earlier, climate change is something where it's a long-term issue. We see very slow incremental action towards addressing it. This is like climate change, but it's actually much more complicated in terms of we don't know what's going to happen. We're talking about many different social policy areas which would have to be modernized to address this type of new world of work that we're talking about. So my concern is that governments historically have not been very good at adapting to this type of situation. I wouldn't bet that they're going to adapt in a coordinated, effective, modern way to this challenge this time around. And history would, I think, support me that there's been very few occasions where a policy problem like this has come along and we've seen a quick rapid and effective
Couple of minutes to go here. Are we up to the challenge of figuring this out?
I don't see this as being a new problem. The jobs that are left, whether they're new technology jobs or old jobs, need to be governed in the same way that any worker is covered by basic social protections, and that the rules that we've got on paper are actually enforced. That has been the big sea change in the last 30 years, is using all of the power of government to help support business and innovation. It's time for some of that energy to go towards supporting their citizens and workers too.
Does your study suggest that we are therefore much more likely to rush headlong towards guaranteed annual income for everybody?
I think that's something Ontario's already about to experiment with. I think the challenge with guaranteed annual income is it's an incredibly expensive program, and I don't think it's necessary at this time, because I don't think we're entering a jobless future anytime soon. We are entering, however, a more precarious, turbulent labor force. And that's why I think, as Armina's also mentioned, we need more of a focus on skills training. We need more of a focus on modernizing our labor force so that we have people who can compete in this technologically fluid and changing world. I think a guaranteed annual income that's kind of the long term if everything goes
But it's in your
pretty
study.
terribly.
You've got it on your list of things
We
in the
talk
study.
about it as something to think about, but in my view, that's not the immediate answer. That's something for us to think about now, and maybe 30, 40 years from now, we move towards some kind of a modified
You want
approach.
the last 30 seconds here?
I would like to say that if technology makes us dream and aspire to crazy moonshots, so should public policy. And a guaranteed annual income is not aspirational. No adult wants their child to aspire to a guaranteed annual income. They want their child to shine. And I want our public policies to help each one of us shine and live up to our full potential with those robots right by our side.
Okay, shine on, you two. Thanks for coming in tonight and helping us out with this. Armin Yalnizyan and Sunil Johal. So nice to have you here at TVO tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.